In this lab, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a relational database server in a multi availability zone deployment. So I'm going to show you in a moment what we're going to start with and then what we're going to end up with, okay? So the starting point for this deployment is going to be, we're going to start with a VPC, which has a CIDR block of 10.0.0.0/16. It's going to have attached an internet gateway so that any EC2 instances located, or any NAT gateway, for instance, in this case, located in the public subnet, is going to be any EC2 instances, any NAT gateways that we place in the public subnets are going to be able to access the internet by means of using the internet gateway. Of course, the routing tables of both public subnets will have to be modified so that they, if they need to go to the internet, they can use the internet gateway as the target. So this deployment pretty much is going to contain, we're going to do it in, we're going to use two availability zones, availability zone A and availability zone B. And we're going, in availability zone A, we're going to have a public subnet 1 and also a private subnet 1. You can see here the CIDR block for the public subnet 1, which is going to be 10.0.0.0/24, which can potentially have a maximum of 251 hosts. If we remove this one, because this is also a host, we had 250. Remember, AWS takes a handful, which means 5 IP addresses from any given subnet that it needs to set aside for its own uses. And then we have this private subnet. You can see private subnet 1, where you can see what the CIDR block is going to be. Pretty much what we're doing here is we're changing the third octet in order to create different subnets. So this is 10.0.10/24. This is 10.0.2.0/24, and this other one is 10.0.3.0/24. So we have public and private subnets in each availability zone. And also you can see that we have a NAT gateway here. This is going to be for any instances or database instances that will be placed in the private subnet. They will be able to access the internet by means of the NAT gateway. And then as you can see here, we have a web server. This is going to be a web server, which in turn is going to end up using a database, a relational database, because the database is going to contain information that the web server will need to be able to extract data from the database. But this is going to be the starting point pretty much, okay? So I'm going to show you in a moment what it's going to look like at the end. Okay, and here it is what this is going to look towards the end. We still keep the, in availability zone, we keep the public and private subnets. In availability zone B, we keep the private and public public and private subnets. The thing that we have just added here is we have added a relational database. Well, in this particular case, we have added a master relational database and a secondary relational database. This type of deployment is called a multi-availability zone deployment because we're going to have a master or a primary database which is going to be in charge of serving traffic. Any requests that come into this web server, if this web server needs to access a relational database, it's going to access this master database. You may ask, why is this secondary database doing here? This secondary database here is also referred to as a standby database server. The main function of this database server is to be synchronizing with the master database. So any changes that are made here are going to be replicated here immediately. This is going to happen synchronously, which means it's going to happen in real time. So there's not going to be any delay. Anything that gets updated here will be updated here at the same time. But the main idea of this situation here, this particular scenario, is that if for some reason the master or the primary database goes down, then this server is going to point to the secondary or standby database. So then this secondary or standby database will be able to serve any requests that are placed on the web server. Uh, and then something that you might ask is yourself is why do we have to why can we have both databases working at the same time? That's a problem that we have with relational databases. You cannot scale them horizontally. What I'm trying to say here is you cannot have both databases serving requests at the same time. That is not something that relational databases are good for. Uh, if anything, if you need, suppose that this database for whatever reason was not enough to handle all the traffic that is coming into it, our only option would be to change this database server to a larger instance. So we have to change the specifications of it, which means we will have to add more virtual CPUs, and we will probably have to add much more RAM to it, okay? But again, relational databases can only be scaled vertically or open down, but what that means is that you can only change the specifications of the host or the machine that is going to of the database instance of the relational database instance that you're using. But again, in this case, the reason why we have two databases is that if the main one goes down, if the master goes down, then this web server is going to point towards the secondary database or the standby database. That way, you will continue in operation. Something that you might have realized here is you say if this one goes down, then we know that this web server will still be operational here and it will be able to send the traffic to the secondary or the standby database. But what happens if this one goes down? The problem that we have here is we only have a web server on this availability zone B, and if this one goes down, then there's no traffic coming from the internet into our web server. That's a problem that we will have in this particular situation. In order to make this a more robust solution, we should have another web server here. And then these two web servers, they would be able to send traffic to either this database, if this is online available, and if this one goes down, all traffic goes down to this secondary or standby database. Again, the main purpose of this database, what does it do most of the time? Most of the time what it's going to be doing is it's going to be synchronizing anything that changes on this master database is going to be synchronized to the secondary or standby database. Okay, so we're going to start working with the lab in a moment. Okay, so the first task that we're going to be performing here is we're going to create a security group for the relational database instance, okay? So the reason why we need that security group is we need to have a security group that is going to be protecting the database server. So in order to do that, I need to find the security group sections. So I'm going to go to the VPCs, to the VPC services, and then I'm going to look for security groups. Security groups is going to be part of the security section, security group, and I'm going to create a database security group. Okay, so we have the web server. This is going to be the one that's applied to the web server, and I need to create a new security group, and I'm going to call it database security group. And the description for it is going to be to permit access to from web server, right? From web server. Oh, by the way, as you can see here, we're only going to allow traffic coming from the web server security group. Um, so permit access from the web security group. So what this means is anything that we have attached the web security group, only we're going to allow traffic from that particular any C2 instances that are placed in that web server security group. They will be the only ones allowed to have access into our database security group. And I need to specify in what in this case we're going to be using the lab VPC because that's where we're creating everything. And in the inbound rules, I need to specify, well, the type of database that I'm going to be using, the engine that I'm going to be using is going to be MySQL. So I need to add a rule that is going to be for MySQL, incoming MySQL or Aurora type of traffic. Well, the reason why I said Aurora is because Aurora is compatible with MySQL. It's also compatible with PostgreSQL. But you see, by just having typed in MySQL, you see that it populated the protocol as being TCP, which is connection oriented, and we have the port is 3306. Now we need to specify what is the source where we're going to be accepting traffic from. In this case, we are not going to be accepting traffic coming from any specific IP address. Instead, we're going to be using traffic coming from the web server security group, okay? So I need to select here. So you can see here, here is if I were to select IP address ranges, but I'm not going to be using IP address ranges. Pretty much what I'm going to be using is security groups. I'm going to be accepting traffic that comes from the web server security group. Okay, so that's going to be, and in this case, I can just simply call this allowing allowing MySQL traffic from web server security group. Okay, and so that's pretty much all I need to do, and now I can create my security group. Okay, good. So far I have taken care of the security group. Now I'm going to have to create a database as a subnet group. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let me take a quick look. Okay, so I'm actually going to be creating, in this case, I'm actually going to go to the RDS section already, which means I'm going to get ready. Let me take a quick look at the VPC, at the lab VPC, and let's take a quick look and see what subnets we have here. The subnets, if I go here, let's see what subnets we have. The lab, okay, let me put them in order here. You can see that I have private, public subnet 1 and private subnet 1, public subnet 1 and private subnet, I'm sorry, public subnet 2 and private subnet 2. Okay, so it seems that I have all the subnets that I need. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to go to RDS. I just confirmed that I do have private subnets that I can use for my RDS, relational database servers. And so I'm going to go to RDS. Remember, if there's any service that you're going to be using often, you can just put you can favorite and it will appear up here. So I'm going to do that because this lab is about relational databases. So I click here, and the next step that I need to do is Okay, so I'm going to go here and I need to go to the subnet groups. That's this section. And then I'm going to go to once I am here, I'm going to select I need to create a subnet group. Okay, and the reason why I'm going to what I'm required to have this subnet group is simply because I need to tell RDS which subnets are going to be used for the databases. And each database subnet group is going to require subnets in at least two availability zones. Remember, I mentioned before that this is a multi-AZ deployment for relational databases. So I'm going to create so I selected subnet groups, and now I'm going to create a new subnet group. So let me see. I don't see anything here, so create a subnet group. And then I need to specify a name for it. So it's going to be database subnet group. And I need to give it a description. I can call it, I guess, database subnet group. And I need to choose the VPC. Remember that I'm working with the lab VPC, okay? And then I need to specify two availability zones, okay? So I'm going to be using availability zone US. Well, but first of all, I needed to make sure that I was in US East 1, which I am there, by the way, which is good. And then I need to select US East 1A and US East 1B. Okay, so in here I need to select US East 1A and US East 1B. And now after I am done with that, I'm going to be creating the subnet and then okay, so I need to specify which are the subnets. The problem here is I know that here I have the public and the private subnets. If you remember, based on the diagram that I showed you earlier, um, the ones that have odd numbers are going to be the private ones. So in this case, in availability 1A, the one that has the odd number in the third octet is my private subnet. And in the second one, the one that has the odd number again is going to be the private subnet, okay? So those are the two subnets where my databases are going to be created. Now, once I have done this, I click on create, and this has been created, which is good. The next thing I need to do is I need to create an RDS database instance. So in this case, and then I'm going to have to select the multi-AZ deployment, by the way, multi-availability zone deployment, because I want to have a master and a secondary, or a master and a standby database. So the next step I need to do is I need to go to databases. Okay, so I'm going to go to databases and then create, switch to the new database creation. So I'm going to click create database. Okay, well, in this case, this is referring to the database instance, pretty much the database virtual machine that is going to host the database. So now that I'm here, I'm going to be using so let me see, share successfully created, create a database, standard create. I'm going to be creating a MySQL database. Give me a moment. Okay, so I can. Okay, so I'm going to be creating a MySQL database, and I need to specify some information about it. I need to go to the settings, so I'm going to leave this as is, and then I'm going to say that I'm going to be using, I assume that I'm going to use the free tier. Okay, so I'm going to be using the free tier. So remember I selected MySQL database, standard create, MySQL, and I'm going to leave this show versions. Okay, I'm going to skip this. I'm going to use this engine version. I'm going to be using the free tier. Well, the free tier doesn't allow me to create multi-availability, so I'm going to have to leave it as production. Otherwise, I cannot create a multi-AC multi-AC deployment. And I don't need a cluster in this particular case. What I need is going to be multi-AZ in multi-DB, multi-database. Okay, creates primary database instance and a standby instance in different availability zones. So this is exactly what I want. And then I need to specify what is the name of my database identifier. And my database identifier is going to be lab. Everything that I have here has lab DB, okay? And the master username, I'm going to be using main for this particular case. And then I need to enter a password. Okay, and then I need to confirm that password here. Okay, I just enter the password, and then I need to specify the standard type. I'm going to be, because I don't want to spend money on this would be expensive if I choose like a family M. I'm going to be using burstable types. Okay, and in this particular case, I'm going to be using database T3 micro. Okay, this will I don't need to incur in spending money on this. Okay, so that's that. Then for the storage, I'm going to be allocating SSD. First of all, it's going to be SSD. That's let me see. I can use general purpose SSD, so I can use this one. Baseline performance. Okay, I can use general purpose. This is the one that we normally use for basic EC2 instances, especially for the T2 micro. And then I'm going to use 20 gigabytes of storage. And the auto scale, I don't need this to auto scale, so I'm not going to need this. And then when it comes to connectivity, I'm going to specify that I need to use the database that I'm going to be using is going the where this is going to be placed is going to be in the lab VPC. Okay. Okay, so pretty much I'm going to select the options, the default options. I need to specify, remember I'm working with the lab VPC, that's why I selected that one. And then I need to select what security group my database is going to use. And as you can remember, I created a security group that was called DB security group, which is the one that I have here. And it's asking me whether I want public access to my database. And that's what I need to find out in a moment. Okay, so I'm not going to require public access, remember, because I placed this inside of a private subnet. So I'm not going to specify that. And then the VPC security firewall, I'm going to remove this one. Virtual Lab Database Security Group. VPC security group or firewall. And let's see what options I have. I have the choose one or more VPC security groups to allow access to your database. I want to allow access from my web server database group. VPC. Choose one or more VPC security groups to allow access to your database. Make sure the security group rules allow the appropriate incoming traffic. Give me just a moment. Okay, so by the way, this one here, even though it has this name, this is not the name of the security group that I created earlier. I need to specify the security group that is going to be used by my database instances from this selection, and it's going to be the database security group. So this is going to be the one that I'm going to be using. Database security group. Let me see, why is it not accepting it? Okay, okay, it's database security group. That is good. And let's see if I need initial configuration. I need to I'm going to expand additional configuration. This is going to be the port that this database is going to be using. And then I need to be selecting what is the initial database name. So we're going to have an initial database, and we need to specify what type of database that's going to be. I guess I'm going to be using password authentication. Okay, so I'm going to be using password authentication. When it comes to, I'm going to have to enable the enhanced monitoring. I'm going to use enhanced monitoring every 60 seconds, I guess. It should be fine. The default mode is going to be the default. If I were to use this for 1 month, I would have to pay about $30, but I'm going to use it for a very small amount of time while this lab is provisioned. So the name of the initial database is going to be lab, and I'm going to enable automated backups, which I have here. I'm also going to enable encryption. Let's see. Enable encryption. This is something that and I'm also going to enable enhanced monitoring. Let me see. Yes, enhanced monitoring is right here. I think the order of these things were. For this retention, I can select 0 days if I want, because I'm going to shut down this shortly after I create it. But again, be aware that if you were to use it for 1 month, it would cost you this much. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to choose create database. Choose LabDB. Let me see just a moment. So I'm going to create database, and it's going to be creating this. This usually takes a while, so I'm going to have to wait for a while. Let me see what happened here. Enhanced monitoring, no, because of missing permissions. Okay, so I guess there was a problem with the permissions for the enhanced monitoring, but I'm not worrying to worry about this. Okay, it seems that the problem that I got was related to having selected enable enhanced monitoring. I did not have permission to that, but that option must have reverted back to what it was before. Okay, and now I guess we just have to wait. It may take about 4 minutes or something like that. So we're just going to wait until the database is. So right now this is in a creating status. The identifier for this is going to be lab-db. It's going to be a database instance. It's going to use MySQL as the engine. This one, the main one or the master one, is going to be creating availability zone 1A. And I'm using the instance type. I'm using a database T3 micro. It's in status, creating a status again. So we have to wait for a moment, because before this database is ready, up and running. Okay, just wait a few more minutes. Okay, so the lab database has been provisioned, as you can see here. It's available. So pretty much what I need to do now is I need to find out the endpoint to the database. So remember that the endpoint is what I'm going to be using to connect to the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this lab and this database identifier called the lab DB. And the next thing I need to do is I need to look for the endpoint, okay? So this is the endpoint that I'm going to be copying, and I will save it. Now the next thing I need to do is, now that I have copied my endpoint, um, okay, now that I have copied my endpoint, I have that information ready, so whenever I need to connect to it, and then the port that I'm going to be using is 3306. That is the port that is being used by MySQL database. And I'm going to create a little sticky here. And okay, so here is the information that I have pretty much, okay? So that's the idea. This is the endpoint that I will use to connect to the database, and then this is the port that I'm going to be using to connect to it. Okay, so now the next step is I'm going to go to the web server that I have running, and here I need to get the IP address of the web server that I have running here. So it's in my instances, and we need to access the web server, okay? And for this web server, what I need to do is, because I need to connect to it via its IP address, and I'm going to connect to it by using a web browser, by the way. I just need to select it. That way I can access its public IP address. So I'm going to copy it from here. And next step I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to that location. And as you can see, I am connected right now. This is, can see information regarding this. RDS refers to the relational database service. Remember, I have a relational database that is running in the private subnet. This server, the web server, is running in the public subnet. So I should be able to indicate what the endpoint is. So in this case, the endpoint is the one that I got from the properties when I was looking at that a moment ago. This is the endpoint. Within this endpoint, I created a database, and I need to find out what the database name is. Okay, the database name is labdb. So it's going to be labdb. And then I need to use the master username. That's going to be main. And I need to use the password, which is going to be the password that I assign it here. There it is. And let's see what happens. Hopefully it will work. I'm not sure whether it will ask me to add normally, because this is an endpoint, it would be 3306. I'm not sure if it's going to require me to do that, but let's submit it and see what happens. No, so it's try, no, don't want to save it. Unable to connect to the database. Okay, so it may be very likely due to the fact that I need to add the port 3306. And then I need to get the password again. Okay, and I click submit. Oh, still unable to connect to the database. This is a little bit unusual. So let me see. Okay, yes, I had some information that I didn't have correct. The database name I created, when I created well, there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of. Um, Whenever I was using the master username and the master password, which is the information that I have here, this is the information that I use to log in into the server itself. So now what I need to do is I need to use what this is asking me is for the database that I want to connect to, and I need to indicate what the username for that particular database is, and also what the password for that particular database is. And just to make it easier, let's use this, okay? So, but this is the endpoint then. The endpoint is going to be this, and the information that I need is going to be this other one. Okay, so let me get it here. I have I have the endpoint. Now I need to indicate this is the lab database, and then I need to indicate that the username is going to be main, and the password is going to be lab password. And if I click submit, let's see what happens. I don't want to save it. No. Executing commands using this. Okay, so okay, we can see here that I connected to a database and it has a couple of entries. In other words, what I can do here, we can see that there is already 2 entries. I could simply add a couple of more entries, but I'm interacting already with the database. So for instance, I can add, let's say, I don't know, let's say that we have Maria. Let's say, oh, but this is the last name. Let's say, I don't know, Rodriguez, maybe. And her name is Maria, and her number is 6. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 4, 9, 9, 9, 9. Okay, and that's Maria's name, and her email address is going to be M Rodriguez, maybe M Rodriguez at someaddress.com. Okay, and I click submit, and you can see that I just added a new name to my database. Okay, and I could add some other names here too. So for instance, I can use, I don't know, we can say Revere, Paul, that's the name, Paul Revere, and maybe that person's number is 617-444-3333. And the email address of Paul Revere is prevere at someaddress.org. Okay. So pretty much what is happening here is I'm already interacting with the database by the name of lab. That database is part of that database instance that I created. You can have multiple databases within a database server. This is just one of those databases. It's called the lab database. And then those are the credentials that I use for that. And now I can add some other contact. Let's say I add maybe do we have a Jane? No, we don't have any Jane there. Let's type in Jane. Maybe we have Jane Doe also. Oh no, we have Jane Doe there. Okay, so it's going to be Janet Doe. And let's say that her number is let's see, 555-555. Just like in the movies, those numbers don't exist normally, but let's see. And then the email is going to be janet.doe at someaddress.com. And I click submit. Okay, so all of these entries have been added to a table In this particular case, I'm working with a table, and this table contains the following columns or the column fields: last name, first name, phone number, email address, um, and then well, this is for the admin. What I can do here is, if I want to suppose that I made a mistake with respect to one of these names, maybe, oh yes, here one. I made a mistake. You can see uh, the last name should have been Doe for Janet, and the first name should have been Janet. Okay, so I'm going to edit that record. Let's see. As we can see, I can edit this record. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, and I'm going to cut this from here and paste it here, and now that record has been corrected. So Janet and Jane are there. If I wanted to remove one of these entries, so remember I just used the edit function. If I wanted to edit, let's say, I don't know, if I wanted to remove Paul Revere, I can just click remove, and this is going to remove this record. By the way, this information here, these are columns. They're also attributes. Attributes. Remember, they're columns of attributes. They contain the same type of information. And then any information regarding a particular individual here is going to be called a record. Okay, this is going to be a record or a row, and then these are columns for the different attributes. So this is going to be a row or a record for a particular individual. And like I said, I can add, you can edit them, I can add, I can remove. This is a very simple version of a database, by the way. Database, most of the time, they have multiple tables, and the tables are going to be interrelated. In this particular case, this is a simple a database that you can have because you only have one table. But again, I can do multiple things. You can see that I can add records, I can edit existing records, and then I can remove records. I haven't removed one record yet, but let's remove Paul Revere. Paul Revere is gone now. You can see that it got removed. So in this case, as you can see, I interacted with the database. I was able to make a successful connection to the database, and pretty much this is the information that I used when I connected to it. I used the endpoint. I used what database I was connecting to, and I used the what was going to be the username for that database. I specified these ones when I created the database, by the way. That's why we have that. We were able to do that connection. So now that you're done, we're done using this database. We have interacted with the database server. The main thing right now, what I should do is, because we don't want to incur into any expenses, we should delete anything that we created that could potentially cost us money. So what I would suggest that you do is take care of your databases. Let's delete the databases. So let me go to the database instances. But I'm going to delete the databases because I don't want to be charged money for this. So I go to the databases, and then I select this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete. Remember, in this case let me actually show you the database instances. Let me see. So I have the dashboard. So we have two databases here. Let me see. So we have two databases. We have two database servers actually. One is in one subnet and another one is in another subnet. So this is the one in availability zone A, but we have another one in availability zone B. That is going to be the standby database server, by the way. And then we had enabled monitoring for the database, I believe. You can see here that the database, at times when I was interacting with it, it was busy doing stuff. That's the main idea about CloudWatch, it allows us to monitor the performance of our database. I wasn't able to select the option to have the database. I wasn't able to enable enhanced database monitoring, which means I wasn't able to monitor the database as often as I wanted because I did not have permission. You can see here the write IOPS, or how many times I wrote to the database. You can see that there were some spikes there, and this is the times that I read from the database. But these are very important metrics when it comes to databases. So let me just take a quick look at the subnet groups. This is where I defined that I wanted two these are the two availability zones, and these are the subnets. These are the private this is the private subnet 1 in availability zone 1, and this is the private subnet 2 in availability zone 2. But that's the main idea about this. This is how this works. Having seen that, let's take care of deleting the databases. Actually, give me just a moment. I want to take a quick look at something. Yeah, so it's working fine. Okay, so I'm going to have to delete these ones, unfortunately, but I don't want to pay money for these databases. So I'm going to, pretty much what I need to do is I need to go to lab database, select it, and then what I'm going to do is just delete. And let's see what happens. Oh, let me see, why didn't this delete? This database has deletion protection enabled. In other words, I need to disable delete protection before I can delete it. So I need to find out that attribute for this database so then I can delete it. Where is the protection? Modify. Okay. We're going to have to wait a moment. Okay, so this finally refreshed. So what I did was I went into this database, and then so what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify. Click on the modify option there. And then remember, this has protection for termination, so I cannot terminate it unless I remove the termination protection from this database. And if you scroll down, I'm looking for termination protection. Let's go slowly. This is the database instance, the master password. This is regarding storage. This is regarding availability. Remember, we created a multi-AZ. Then the other thing, the password authentication. That's why I was able to authenticate with this main and lab password. That's what we had there. The enhanced monitor was the thing that gave me an error message. I wasn't able to enable that. But I'm now looking for disable. Okay, you can see deletion protection. So because of this, I wasn't able to delete it. Now I'm going to click continue and modify database instance. So now that I've done that, I should be able to delete it. And now I need to confirm. You can see to confirm deletion, type delete me into the field. So this is just an extra protection I need to do. I click delete me, and that database is now going to be deleted. Okay, so right now it's in the process of being deleted. I also need to take care, while this is being taken care of, this might take some time. So what I'm going to end up doing now is I'm going to go to my EC2 instance, and then I need to delete also those two EC2 instances that I have here. And this is way to delete those ones is going to be to terminate them. So hopefully they don't have termination enable protection, or otherwise I'm not going to be able to terminate them. But let me go here to terminate instance, and I click terminate. This has been successfully terminated, and let's go to the web server and terminate instance. Terminate. It says that both of them have been successfully terminated. So if I refresh, you can see that I don't have any running EC2 instances. By the way, this is a filter. It's filtering anything that is running. But if I remove that, you can see that these are in shutdown process. When it comes to my RDS, I should be able that it's being deleted if it hasn't been completely deleted already. But I should be able to see if I go to databases that I don't have any databases. Yes, you can see that it's in the deleting process. But pretty much that's all you needed to do to avoid incurring into any charges, because if I had left it on, I would have incurred maybe like $30 a month, and I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to learn to use this. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed this video, and that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.